Hello, thank you for attending the meeting. We'll first introduce all ourselves. My name is Linda Lukowski. I'm Chair of the Triton School Committee.
Leslie Matthews, Select Board, Newbury.
Larry White, Chairman, Finance Committee, Raleigh.
Jeff Walker, Newbury Select Board.
Erica Coles-Jacobson, Chair, Newbury Finance Committee.
Narissa Wallen, School Committee. Christine Nealon, Select Board Raleigh.
Sherry David, Selectman Raleigh.
Ronnie Ray Parrott, Select Board Salisbury.
Peterson Solo, Finance Committee in Raleigh. Terry Moreggi, Select Board Salisbury.
Michael Coleman, Select Board Salisbury.
Brian Forget, Superintendent of Triton.
Can we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And before we start, I just want to thank Brian and his team for bringing home the Salisbury and Newbury students from Saco, Maine to make sure that they were safe. I appreciate that.
Oh, the trip was cut short.
Yeah, it was one of those, obviously
I
it
didn't
was,
even realize they were
it was
there.
not a lot of information last night, but then this morning it was an abundance of caution and because
Yeah.
he had ties to Saco. Saco schools closed and so we had to rally buses. It's not easy to get buses to our schools, let alone an hour and a half north of here, so. So,
Wow.
thank you to
Well, thank
Coach.
you
I
for
will say
that.
the Coach Bus Company did a phenomenal job because they came out of Rhode Island to get those two buses up there.
Wow.
They pulled in, I think they got to camp about noontime. And we started about.
It was only two schools? I thought they changed it to being three.
So they can't fit all three at the camp at the same time. So they're all at the same camp now. Eventually, hopefully, when the three, there's still some COVID restrictions, my understanding, in place at the ecology school. So it's the way that they've rearranged it, I think, is a cost to get it all back to being able to allow, but eventually they think they'll be able to get all three of the schools together at the same time. So they're all at the ecology school now. Salisbury and Newbury went this week. Pine Grove was there 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I think the week of the 6th.
Wow.
So.
And the DCC notes from last meeting were sent to everybody, so if everybody wants to take a look at that, you don't have to vote on them. The next item is the general update. I'll hand that to Brian.
So just a quick update on the year. Can't believe it's already almost November, but the year is off to a great start. I can't say start because we're well into it, bless you. Great things happening, just a couple highlights. You know that meals are now free universally, breakfast and lunch for all students. There was some questions that I'd heard about the committee adjusted their meal prices last year at the end of the year when meals were free. We have to set a certain rate for meals per the Department of Education. So we still do have that rate because it's the first meal and the first breakfast that's free. There are many who get doubles. So the double is not free. So they do pay, there are à la carte items, there are full additional meals. So that additional part is not free. So it's not an unlimited buffet. The first meal is completely free for both breakfast and lunch. And the participation is phenomenal. The committee will be receiving information over the course of this year with that additional sustained revenue stream that's not on the backs of parents. It's gonna allow us to offer more nutritious offerings, more customized and just not your basic cafeteria fare. So we're hopeful in that program will continue to grow in the years ahead. Buses, I don't know if you're hearing from families. It is a significant improvement over last year. We are still well behind where we were pre-COVID. We have 4 less buses than we had 2 years ago. There are now only 19 buses running. When I started in this gig back in 2005, I believe there were 30 buses. So we reduced 2 buses in the budget for the current year. We left 2 in that we're still looking to fill. We cannot find drivers, I should say we, NRT, we contract with. They cannot find the drivers. We've been lucky enough that when they get a new driver, they fill in just as another driver's leaving. And we're looking to get substitute drivers so that we don't have a lot of consolidations. You know, those of you with kids, the consolidations were crazy last year. Every morning we were consolidating bus routes, and the bus routes didn't fit all of the students that we were picking up. So we can say the bus routes are very efficient these days. They are full, at least as far as the students we're assuming are riding them, and depending on the day. But that is still a work in progress. If you do hear concerns, please send them my way. I mean, parents are generally very comfortable sharing concerns, but if there are things that you hear that you're not aware of, let me know. Happy to chat with you so you can give the information, or happy to talk to parents as well.
How many buses are at Pine Grove this year?
Oh, I didn't even ask for the breakdown. There are 6.
Wow.
There are 19. I want to say it's 6, 5, 6. No. I can get you the exact number. I
That's
believe
what- I
it's
was
6.
just curious because there were, I think, 8 when I was there, so.
Yeah. And there were, at one point, there were 10, 11, and 9. That was the number. Currently, Salisbury is the smallest elementary school in the district,
That's crazy.
right? So it's Newbury by enrollment, resident enrollment, would be the smallest school in the district, were it not for school choice. But with the school choice numbers, that school is slightly larger. I don't know if I probably shouldn't have said that without having the exact numbers. I want to say Salisbury is like 404, Newbury's about 425, and Pine Grove's a little larger at about 440.
Where are your programs, the SEL programs, the ASD programs? Are they all
So-
Newbury too?
So there are roughly, between the autism program and the medically fragile program, that's the TLC and the ALPS program, I want to say there are 34 students.
And those are at Newbury?
So those are at Newbury, and so in that count, those are students, they are registered at that school, even though they, those students lives in Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury. We don't currently have any tuitioned in. In the past, we've had students that we tuition in from other towns.
But that may add to Newbury's numbers
That
too.
inflates, yep, so that's true, yeah, so and it's probably more equal that Newbury and Salisbury would be equal, with Pine Grove being the largest. So again, any questions about busing, please do let me know. Staffing, we're still not ideal. We still have some positions that we're looking to fill. The 2 programs at Newbury have been the hardest to fill, the specialized severe special needs programs. We've been working with staffing agencies saying we'll pay top dollar to get someone in there. Haven't been successful there, so we now currently have just filled them hopefully this week, and last week we have 2 people that are starting, one to cover a maternity leave and one to cover the short term for the balance of this year. So again, positions have been filled. Last year we were in a very different place. We have substitutes these days, we haven't had substitutes, so I won't say it's, again, not anywhere near back to ideal, but we continue to see slow but steady improvements as far as all those things across the board. Then the only thing I wanted to mention is just to clarify, I know there's been lots of discussion about Whittier, and there's been discussions about my role, about the committee's role in that process. So just to clarify, I know Maureen well. She is this, superintendent like I'm a superintendent. She is the superintendent of a separate district. She doesn't share direct information to me. The school committee appoints the school committee reps for Whittier, 11 of them, I believe. 1 from each community, right? So it's 11 of them.
2
I
from
think.
Haverhill.
2 from Haverhill and 2 from Newburyport, right?
But we only
So we do the 3, right?
We only do the 3.
So just because the only role that the school committee has is in appointing the school committee members. They don't have any responsibility to come back and report to the school committee on any of their information. They haven't. This is now my 19th year in the district office, and there's never been a time that the school committee reps have come to report to the Triton School Committee. So just to clarify, I know it's going to be an interesting winter and spring talking about that project. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that that's not something we have purview over, that we can speak into or have the authority to say what should or shouldn't be happening.
And there is a representative from all three towns, so.
And I think that was something that became very clear to us, that it feels like it wasn't transparent, but I think it's just because there isn't communication with our representative. So at the end of that meeting, we talked to our representative, and kind of like we have Linda, or a school committee member, come twice a year to speak to the board. We have asked him, and I've asked Neil to add that to our reports that are given, because we feel as though they should also be coming to us to give us reports. And that guy was very happy to do such, he had no problem whatsoever. So I think that was, again, we can't go back and change the transparency or the knowledge that we did or did not have. But I think moving on, having somebody come to report to the select board twice a year will help us at least have a little bit more information.
Yeah.
And I think what we can do is when one of those reps are up for election, we can let you know who it was that we appointed. So we can make sure that all three towns have that information as well.
And I think it's, the town's involvement with Whittier has been a handful of students, relatively minor impact in the grand scale, obviously, of things with Triton. And so it's just been kind of a historical thing. That's not about any of the players currently at the table or in the chairs. It's just kind of historically, it's the way it's always operated. It's obviously a big deal for Haverhill with 70% of the student enrollment, where it just hasn't been a big topic of discussion with town. So I do think it's a good thing to open the line of communications directly with the town officials.
So just to know, our next select board meeting is Monday, and Maureen Lynch and company are coming to do a presentation. You are all welcome to attend.
Thank you.
So they've now.
It's at 6 o'clock.
Newbury, I was trying to pull up when ours is. I know that they're coming to select board, and then there's also a public information session as well.
Yeah, they did a public
So-
one Tuesday night at, Narissa, was it Tuesday night?
Yeah.
At the Raleigh Public Library, and then they're coming to present to our select board on this coming Monday at 6 o'clock.
It's good that they did the public first. For us, it was the opposite, and we were getting a lot of feedback from citizens were gonna come to the select board and ask questions, and so we had to put it out very quickly that this is their presentation to us. We will not be allowing citizens to get up to be able to ask questions, that is gonna happen during that meeting. So we really set that boundary pretty quick, or else we would have been there for 5 hours. So it's better that you guys had yours that way, cause that people could ask the questions beforehand.
Yeah, so they're doing it in every one of the communities. They're doing a community meeting, and then
Yes.
some are doing, they call it tri-boards, where it's the finance committee, the select board, and other.
Were there hard numbers at these meetings, or are they just?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There is now, but there's nothing back in the minutes on the agendas. We've been trying to find where this price came from, and there's just nothing. There's
Good.
no information.
We'll tighten it up when it gets to us.
There's
Yep.
their website too, is that throughout this, there is a public website that Whittier's kept going. There's a building committee website with certain things, so that's been, unfortunately, that's been the best place I've been able to find, and I've also emailed
But I
directly
didn't
to
see
them.
any figures on there. Do they have the,
They have different parts, different times, and I was able to I got some information last spring on what the breakdown, what the formula is by town. Because I was just curious what that would look like, and I don't have my notes or my computer with me, so I don't wanna speak about it and say something that's incorrect. But I did find that reaching out directly to them is how I got that information.
because we didn't see anything on the Whittier Wire or something like that, their newsletter that they.
It wasn't in the newsletter, there's one specific to the building committee.
Reach out to their business, is that who you?
It was directly, like I said, I can't find the information on my phone right now, but I did, there's a public website specifically for the building project, that's not the school.
It's like
It's its own,
funding Whittier Future or something.
yeah, it's something, and so I went down that path and reached out to them directly. And tried to get some background information just for my own.
Were you able to get
Yep.
the back?
Yeah.
If you go to the main Whittier website, there's a link to it.
Yeah, okay, that's,
So that's all I wanted to share.
Has anybody,
One of the things that I would like to have added to the next meeting agenda is a discussion of having Triton meet with each town's board of selectmen and have the board basically come up with a estimate of what that town can afford as far as a Triton budget. Because we're all looking at 464 million for Whittier, Triton renovation, and the Triton budget. And you can only successfully rob a person once in an hour. And not that I'm saying that we're being robbed, but we don't have the money. And we have to start addressing what the towns can afford and what Triton needs. And we had to forego 2 policemen, a fireman, and a fire department assistant last budget because we didn't have the money.
And we don't have coverage at night either. After 6 o'clock, there's nobody
Right.
there.
At the fire.
At the fire station, yeah,
Right.
there's nobody there.
Yeah.
So,
okay, we'll
that's
add that to the,
I would like to have a discussion on it first if we could and hear from the other towns. Because my concern again is every time we go out to towns separately, anything we do affects all 3 towns. So sitting here, we can have that conversation with all the people that are impacted. Here, I'm worried about the school committee going separately and having these kind of sequestered conversations without all of the involved parties that are impacted being part of that conversation. And I don't know if that's shared by the other towns.
no, I
But
think that's what the
I-
DCC meeting is probably for, is to have these discussions at these meetings. You know,
We can certainly try that, as long as all 3 towns will have someone there that can speak the budget and say, hey, this is what we can
right,
afford.
but this is the meeting that we have to have those meetings at. So that everybody's here at the table hearing the
Fine, and
same
I'd like to-
information.
At least add it to the agenda so that we can, if there's any discussion about it.
Yeah.
And I'll say, not necessarily assign a person from each town that could speak finance. It's gonna be necessary. Granted, it would be best if all 3 towns heard what Rowley, Newbury, and Salisbury could afford.
But over the budget season, you'll hear what Triton's going to be needing as well.
Yes, but it's kind of been one way as far as what Triton needs as opposed to what the towns can afford. And also the discussion as far as the budget is concerned has to be more detailed than just a top line effort. You know, if you're.
I'm pretty sure that budget is pretty detailed. The budget that Brian and his team put together is pretty detailed, exactly what's needed in all the line
It is
items.
up to a point, but when it comes to, we'll say, Pine Grove needing, we'll say 50 special education people. What are they doing? What is their time commitment? How necessary is it, type of a thing, or we'll say something easier, teachers' assistants.
I would think that's the school board committee's job, that's not the board of selectmen's job. And that's not the Raleigh financial job. So I don't know why you wanna have that conversation, that's the elected officials who are sit on the school board committee, that's their job to work with Brian on that. It's not ours.
And I think over the past few years, Brian and his team have made sure that every person, I mean, I'm sure Mrs. Nealon can speak to that I'm sure there's a lot of things that she wanted in the school when she was the principal, and we put in exactly what was needed. I mean, a lot of special eds, if you have a one-to-one by the IEPs, you have no choice.
You
but
have
to
no
give
choice,
them-
you have to,
But to give them the services that they deserve. So if you have a one-to-one, you have to have an IA in there. So whether we want to increase a number or not, a lot of times we don't have a choice. You have a
I
lot of
realize
you
that.
have a lot of medically fragile students. I mean,
I think he's probably just using that as an example.
I know, but I think
But-
we, as a school committee, as Brian, we explain that budget.
Right.
in
But
this-
you guys aren't the one that have to come up with the money
Oh,
to fund it.
I understand that, but we have
And
to, we
that's all
have
we're
to.
asking for.
I know, but we will discuss the budget line by line exactly as to what is needed. And every year we try to be as conscious as we can to the three towns.
We'll have to say, sitting through this for a dozen years, is that the way that it's been presented in years past of the, where are there gonna be things that are increasing? Those line items they've been called out, they've been explained well in terms of the rationale behind those, why there's an increase. If there's a facilities increase and in terms of the cost of services to keep the lights on, keep the heat going, that has been explained. The contracted changes in personnel costs are mostly being driven by contract changes and then the steps. So I think that that's been a very good back and forth. And I think that among the towns, there's a certain expectation that about 50% of our budget is going there, and it's gonna swing a little bit, but that formula takes it out of our hands so early. If I talked about the times that we sat in that room trying to think about the ways to look at the formula, it's a swing based on the minimum local contribution that the state sets, so that's none of us have a say in it, the state gives us that number. And then the enrollment distribution, again, we get that number from the state as to what our percentages are, and that's such a huge driver of it, that you could say we can afford an increase of only $100,000. But there's nothing that's gonna say that Rowley, going into it, we know that that's gonna happen, or that it's, this year the swing might hit Newbury harder. We don't know that until that number comes from the state, and it's not till after the first of the year. And I think that the school committee does a great job of working with the budget and keeping it as low as possible. I haven't seen any extravagant ads of programs, even though we want them. I haven't seen any massive ads of teachers or things that we want. We have things, we want bus drivers, we can't get them. They prepare a realistic budget. And I think we need to have faith in that and then question and come to those meetings that are open to the public and to these meetings as well with that.
And some of the programs that we have added was to keep some of those special education students in our district. So we've added programs, but over time, that is gonna save so much money, having those programs in our schools.
I guess what happens to a lot of this is, you know, in my tenure of selectman, I wish I could have been more omniscient and reached in and staged things as we sit here in a rented town hall. I mean, we do have fire stations, we do have town hall needs, we do have school districts now wanting to replace their buildings. And thank God we have Brian and the team in place, because at least we'll have some insight, I imagine, into the construction and how proportionate it's gonna be to the amount of students and everything else within our communities when it comes to Triton. We're not gonna know much about the other school. And those are the questions that I get from people in the community.
I think we should also be careful of, we're building two schools because of lack of maintenance. So us crushing the numbers and the school board crushing the numbers, Brian crushing numbers, is now we have to fix two schools, we have to rebuild two schools because of people crushing numbers. And second guessing our school board committee and our administration staff. That's why we're building 2 schools.
I think that goes for all your municipal buildings.
I do
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
But
operating budget
I
versus capital.
talked to Narissa, we went to school together. I talked to everyone I could talk to, school board committee members all the time. They're doing their best to keep the budget as low as possible. Our issues in our individual towns, we all have the same issues. We all were trying to figure out how to staff, police staff, fire. And I talked to Lieutenant Governor Driscoll a month and a half. She was at the beach and we talked for about 2 hours about the school system. The problem is, in the State House, we don't really have anyone speaking for us because they don't have the numbers and votes. Boston, Worcester, Springfield, they have all the votes. They get all the money. So what's really crushing us is the state's lack of ability to help us fund our schools. That's what's crushing us. It's not the school system crushing us. Our kids, we have a legal right. We have to teach our children. If we had bad school systems, our home values go down. Everything is correlated to our school systems to keep our values of our houses up. So if we want to sit here, I would never support crushing the school budget, ever. And I know most of the Salisbury selectmen will never support that. I know our town manager will not allow our school systems to be crushed over financial reasons. It's a bad policy. All of our houses will be going down. Our tax revenues will be going down. So we really gotta think, if we wanna start trying to crush Brian and our school board's budget and trying to supersede them and overlooking them, it's not a great policy. We elect school board committee members to do that for us. The select board has nothing to do with that.
I think Larry understands that. I think what I'm hearing is that when the Triton budget is being worked on, you know, we need to make sure that, are we trimming where we can trim? And I'll give you an example. When I was a building principal, we were told I worked for multiple superintendents in the Triton district. There were times where at a leadership meeting, we were told, you 3 elementary principals, you need to go back to your building and tell me where you're gonna cut $75,000. Am I right? I mean, we have gone through those exercises. So I think that's the point, is making sure that if there are places to trim, we need to be able to do that.
Have you went to our high school? Have you went to our schools?
Yeah, I worked there.
Okay then. I think they're trimming too much, in my personal opinion.
Michael, for me, my master's is in education. I was a 4th grade teacher. I will pay teachers all day long. But I'm one of those guys, and it doesn't work anymore because of what we need for buildings and what the Massachusetts this and that expects, but good education could really exist in a modern building.
It could. You're
So
100% right.
I think there has to be that balance, and once people, that's where we couldn't get our town hall through.
Yep.
So
Which I fully understand and agree with you on that, Jeff.
I'll
But
pay teachers all day long.
I'll take teachers all day long too, but if we continue to cut more, I mean, when you cut something gets taken away from the kids. That's just how it is. And unfortunately, the state has put us, all 3 of our towns, in this predicament.
But it's also, I think it's the people that are in charge of teaching our kids. Administration is great, but sports and the in-school process is what makes our schools great.
Yes, we have some of the best sports teams in the whole entire state.
Well, and sometimes we don't because we're lacking in sports funds.
Yes.
Have you been reading the news?
Hey, my daughter's a softball player, we're doing damn good on that end.
That's the balance, because we have a lot
Yeah.
of people in our communities that don't have kids, and it all starts and finishes, so I would love to know what kind of a building they're gonna be building for you, and we'll find out.
I know I talked to
Sorry,
Senator
Linda's
Tar.
throwing bugs at me, just so you know.
I talked to Senator
I saw
Tar.
something flying around.
He's supposed to be
It's a
getting a
bee.
meeting with
It's
all
a
the.
B, it's been,
Did it fly away?
it's probably on the floor between you guys, but.
I talked,
Don't kill the bee.
I talked to Senator Tar, and he's supposed to be working on trying to get all those legislators of the 11 communities together so we can actually find out what's going on with Whittier.
Yeah, because when you get up into that cost, 11 communities doesn't seem like a lot,
It does,
so.
but it's still $64 million
State's gotta be-
coming out of our district.
state's gonna
with
be.
the 3 towns is $64 million.
And an agreement that is 57 years old?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the print.
And the
Type like
saddest
this.
thing, and the saddest thing, we don't have more kids going. We don't have no more opportunities. And I'll say it, the BS statement that the administration made from Whittier is, well, just, it's a test, so we just know, well, that's not what's going on. Brian can fill you in what's going on, is like Salisbury, for example, we test low. So a lot of those kids don't have an opportunity to go to Whittier. So you're asking me to pay more money, but you're not giving me my children more opportunities.
Which is about as counterintuitive as you can imagine.
Yes,
And we still won't be guaranteed
Well,
any seats.
they shifted the vocational schools about
I know,
5, 6,
And then
7
we-
years ago, and it's
And the
not
exact kids
the
that don't
purpose.
test well are the ones that really
Yeah.
need
Really
to,
need to be
go
in there.
there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And they're getting
64%
kicked out
of
the
Whittier goes
process.
to college.
You know,
Yeah.
they're getting kicked out of the process.
It's not fair, it's not a fair process. And then Brian and our school, we can't offer those programs at Triton because they offer it at Whittier.
Well, they were cut, we didn't have the facility and the the teachers and be able to upkeep the equipment, so they all got cut.
I mean, I think Salisbury is almost $500 more a year between the two schools if everything goes the same.
And yet, the way Whittier has projected itself and the way it's gone, this receiving the highest accolades imaginable. In some ways, like we just said, I don't think they're meeting the needs of what they were originally created for, but
No,
I
they're
don't
not.
really understand.
And I do know that because Senator Tar and Rep. Shannon and I have talked, and there is a discussion about going to like lottery system, and are there ways that you can change that and shift that so that it's not college
There was an original
bound.
mission of Whittier, and I'd kinda like to see it, but
Or the original mission is
Christine has
people
it
like
right
me
there.
who won't go into college, who work with their hands,
I
to give them an opportunity.
I know
That's what it was designed for.
That's
That's right.
Okay, do we have any more discussion about Triton?
So can I just end by saying, so for our building project that will eventually happen someday
Who's
for the
gonna
middle
spend your
school, high
money
school.
for?
Yeah. It's a race. So not only will you have insight into that process, you will have a seat at the table for those discussions, so
And Raleigh has Narissa, our secret weapon, so.
a secret weapon, secret agent.
I always say,
She brings
Narissa,
it
and
back.
I'm not just saying it because I know her, she's one of your bestest assets in Raleigh.
Absolutely.
We know.
Guys,
Absolutely.
Just in Raleigh.
You don't share.
Okay,
Let me just say in closing that I never once said that Triton's budget has to be slashed and burned. Understood, yes. Give us, the towns, a chance to give some inputs to what we feel that we can afford, I think is a valid point.
Don't you guys do that every year in your letter you send out? You send out a letter every year saying this is how much we can, you guys are the only town that do that, we don't do that.
Yes, that's one of the problems, is that it's just Raleigh.
Well, because that's not how we're gonna ever work, that was, I think, our point, is we're not gonna go, this is the letter. So that's not how we have chosen to do, but you guys have, and so you guys are doing that every year, I mean, it's
Well,
a
then you
letter
just
here.
come up with a letter that says, we can't figure out what the hell the budget's gonna be. Hit us.
we can't.
No, we have all those meetings ahead of time and we talk about it and we talk about whether or not you have the capacity or where you think our expectations are, if they're in line with yours, and we have a number of months worth of conversation to make sure that we're on the same page before we ever present a budget to the towns. So we do spend an awful lot of time working on budget. We spend 3 months at minimum with conversations on a weekly basis, hoping that people will come forward and engage with us.
Sorry, I just watch it on TV. I keep informed that way.
It's here though. We do it at the DCC, we do it at the school committee meetings,
And I
we have
understand-
public hearing.
I
Yeah,
understand
just
where people that have been in politics a little while can speak like that because 10 years ago, it certainly wasn't the way it is now.
Right.
And it's 100% better, you have to say that word.
Oh, yes.
So, But if you've been around at all, it was Triton was not forthcoming. And I'm just saying because trust me, I was there.
Me too.
Me three?
One of the things I think is and I'm for new buildings and everything, but like schools and colleges and even hospitals, one of the big things is all the money that's spent on capital. Why do we have, when I went to school, the buildings were like 80, 90 years old. Now, if the 50 years old building, it's old, we got a new one. And that is appreciable, that makes up a good portion of, where the money's going to. I hear you, Larry, you talking, about operating costs, but capital is even more significant, I think,
I guess what really makes it hard, and I still reel from it when I'm in municipal government, is when it costs more money to put an addition on to something existing or to repair than rip the whole damn thing down. And I don't understand that concept because it doesn't really make sense to me. But that's what we get told over and over again.
Codes change, ADA changes, I mean, all that kind of stuff, unfortunately.
Well, it's public bidding too.
It's
public
energy
bidding.
codes that drive it, and that to me, no.
And I know I've heard these conversations echo through the towns attempting to do municipal projects. We're part of the North Shore Education Consortium.
Yes.
I'm on the board, and so I chair the finance committee, and there's an HVAC project that went out to bid. 2 years ago, the discussion was around $2 million. The projected cost was 9.97, working with an OPM. The bids came in at 13.97, because no one else bid. And when you talk to the contractor, say, yeah, I knew so-and-so was busy, so I floated a number. Cool. And it's, right, is that collusion, is that playing the market? I don't know, but rarely is a publicly bid project reflective of an authentic construction cost.
What that tells me is if you're a kid, go to Whittier.
Yeah.
If you can get in.
Yeah, so just to put out there, so we had prioritized, to your point, Jeff, and it might be more cost, or it might be more expensive, but we had to prioritize when we submitted the statement of interest, what our priority is, and our priority is renovation. We have to study everything, because the MSBA, if they're gonna invest 50% of the cost, they wanna know there's at least a 50-year life cycle. So they might, after studying it, might be more cost effective to build new. I don't think so, because we're not, there's a lot of many parts of that building that work well. It's just in need of some help, so, yeah. We're not gonna make a new T building.
The next item is the designated representatives.
I got that.
We want to confirm at least 2 members of each select board and at least 2 members of the Finance Warrant Advisory Committee to participate in the monthly DCC. So I don't know if,
Newbury Finance Committee has just seated a full committee, and we will be appointing members at our next meeting, which is November 7th. And tonight, actually, the 2 new members want to just stand up, say hello, and we don't know who's gonna be in.
Richard Keys.
Patrick Heffernan.
So they are new members of the Newbury Finance Committee, and we will have our first meeting with the updated group on the 7th, and we'll be selecting reps, because that's been on our agenda since July.
So Sherry and I were both voted in at a select board meeting back in September, I believe it was, or maybe it was August. So we'll be the representatives from the Raleigh Select Board. And Larry, you're still gonna do FinCom rep?
I'm still gonna do FinCom rep.
And Peter?
And Leslie and I. Mike and Terry. Or Mike and who?
We don't, I mean,
Doesn't matter.
because we've made it very clear that we feel as though all 5 of us can come, that we don't, that there's no open meeting violation, and we've checked that out, so, I mean.
and
do you-
usually 2 Salisbury reps
Yes.
at each meeting anyway.
Typically
Just
Donna can't come today because she was doing trunk or treat, so she made sure she texted all of us to make sure someone's here, so we will always we talk amongst each other every day practically, I feel like. So we'll always make sure somebody is here. We're not gonna appoint someone, we'll make sure somebody's always here. And as far as our finance committee, so we've always run into that with, you know, we've never had a finance committee person come. I mean, we can have that conversation about appointing someone, but our finance committees run a little bit different than the other towns.
I was gonna,
I
does it
guess.
function differently as a warrant
It does. It's
advisory versus
mostly
a finance?
Yeah, it's warrant
Yes,
advisory.
yes.
They do go over the budget, but I mean,
Our warrant advisory committee has no role in putting any budget together. Their only role is to have a public hearing on the warrant articles and to recommend or not recommend them at town meeting. That's it. We don't really have a finance committee per se.
And the
and
unelected
it does.
appointed person to Triton is Ronnie. We all trust what she has to say. She has
I
way
mean,
more
we're always
knowledge.
gonna make sure someone's here. I don't think we're gonna.
But no more than 2 from the select board.
No, we have 5.
I thought you had, that's considered a quorum.
Nope, because we, there's aren't any votes, we have had our lawyers check it out, we have gone round and round with this. Our lawyers have advised us that we aren't voting on anything, there is no, if the meeting is posted as a DCC
Yeah, just post it, you're
communication,
fine.
then it's not
I
an
was
issue.
told otherwise, that's.
So
By
I think the
town council,
town,
yeah.
right, yeah. So
Town
our-
council, different town councils have
Right,
had different opinions.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
that's
why we
why,
were told we could only have 2 select.
I mean, I think our last meeting, we had all 5, no, we had 4 of us, Terry wasn't there, we had 4 of us. So we've always.
I'm not challenging, I'm just.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
it was a question, so we had our attorneys look at it years ago and.
And school district attorneys felt the same way, that it's, and again, it's an attorney, I won't blame anyone, was sharing in a discussion last week with a group of superintendents that many attorneys go to the abundance of caution standard when advocating around this. So if you aren't deliberating, it's pretty clear that if there's no deliberative authority, this board has no authority. It's a communications group, there's only sharing of information. So if this half of the room wanted to do one thing and this half of that didn't, it doesn't change anything, cause it's just about a discussion. So that's been my understanding, and attorney I was speaking with said that if you're not deliberating, the discussion's over about breaking open meeting law.
That's fine,
So-
I just wanted clarification.
Deliberating or voting, right.
It'll just be
Yeah,
us from
yeah.
probably.
Which is good, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's been the approach is whatever town decides,
Yeah.
great, if we have a couple from each of
And
the.
obviously Larry and Peter from the FinCom, yeah.
Okay, the next item is the landlord tenant update, receive an update on the work being done by the landlord tenant working group.
It's just gonna stay on the agenda until I get the information back. So I've been working with Michelle Griffin from the Department of Ed. I think it's actually fairly close. Again, I shared with you last month, we were hoping to codify the capital thresholds and say it's 20,000, anything over 20,000. It becomes the responsibility of the town of Salisbury for SES and Newbury and so forth. We tried to say the thresholds and the apportionment will be delineated in a lease agreement. That can't be the case by law. The regional agreement has to talk about the apportionment. So I've been wordsmithing with Michelle at the Department of Ed and she with her legal department to see if there isn't a way that we could kind of meet somewhere in the middle that it still gives us some ability to have some flexibility so that the town select boards and the school committee could agree a change. So I hope to have, she knows our goal is to have it, I told her I'd like to have it confirmed ASAP, but over the winter, we'd like to get it to the town meeting this spring. So hopefully, do we have a December meeting? We have a November meeting, hopefully by the November meeting.
November's in Raleigh.
We switched them,
We
right?
switched, yeah.
And then you're in
And we
I
January,
won't be here, right.
but you'll be there in January.
Yes, that's why we switched
That's
it,
right.
because I was not gonna be here.
The next item is the alternative assessment, to confirm the reconstituted alternative assessment working group and set a first date of the group to review other potential operating budget assessment calculations.
We haven't met?
We haven't, so this is Brian dropped this ball. So I was supposed to grab this group, so it's the two of you,
Yeah,
right?
Terry and I,
It's you, Ronnie, it's Narissa, it's me,
Kyle.
Kyle from Mile, yeah. And then, was there anyone, was it,
It used to be me,
Yeah.
yes, I will come back. I think. I'll come back until if I'm not.
But I think
I
it's
thought
how,
we put
you,
this-
you see the numbers in very different ways. I'm a social worker, I don't see numbers the way you do, so I appreciated you and
Yeah, so you
Kyle.
don't see numbers.
I don't, I don't see
Yeah,
numbers.
no, I'm happy to play the numbers
doing
game.
Right, but
Yes.
you and Kyle, I think together
Yeah, we
helped a
have
lot
a-
of aha moments for the
Yeah.
rest of us non-number
But I
people.
thought we
Yes.
put this to sleep, we didn't.
It was
So-
resurrected
so
at the
it
last
was-
meeting.
So it's been resurrected, not in the spirit of having a decision that's made annually to say, we're gonna go with the statutory formula per the agreement. It's in having an alternative method in the agreement, in deciding every year and bringing it to the vote every year. It's a, what do you call it, a pressure valve, right? It's a kind of a circuit breaker to say, if we have these extreme years where two towns are going way up and one town's going backwards, is there something where we can say, in a year like that, we would love to have a mechanism that could be put into place that would allow it to just level out. And again, even in those cases, all three towns would have to support it. So there's nothing we can do, there's nothing that town meetings could do to take away the requirement that on any time you use anything other than the statutory method, all three town meetings have to pass that budget. Right now, obviously, we experienced this past year, the budget's approved if 2 of 3.
I think the
the
challenge,
statutory.
Jeff, is that that there were a number of restrictions kind of placed by the people
That's okay.
participating to say like it had to be super simple to explain and it had like all these things. As people swap in and out on the boards, those opinions change. So this is just a revisit to say we couldn't make that, which I think made sense to everyone around the table. But we couldn't make it work within the framework of all the other, it also must do this thing. The other things it has to do were determined by the people sitting at the table. So if the people sitting around at this table are changing, it just makes sense to go back one more time and just say, like, can we drop that it has to be
But
the easiest, you have to explain it in 15 seconds or
The agreement didn't start here
less.
at this table, you know, so the agreement was the agreement was the agreement, but that's discussion for another day.
So do you have are you gonna throw out a date?
I am not. I put it on the agenda because I dropped the ball. So I will communicate with each of you and we will set up a date. And Nicole will keep me honest, yeah.
And it's always good to bring this up to see if by chance there is a formula that could possibly work for the three towns. So we always want to keep those avenues open to see if there's anything.
And I think the spirit that we would reconvene this discussion is, if after a meeting, everyone's like, oh, hell no, then we're not gonna keep, beating our head against the wall.
I'll financial
But
model
that's what we
until
said
I'm
last time.
blue, but I'm like, Kyle and I were like, we had different charts and rolling averages and 5-year past averages based on prior years, I think the part that I think we kind of came down to is that the fact that the state holds two numbers. Until they release them, we don't know what that means to the towns. We can't accurately predict what it's gonna do.
Even foundation enrollment. I learned
Exactly,
that.
that's the thing,
I thought
like
I could
that's,
calculate it.
we thought we were gonna be close and it was totally off last year, like it's
And I'll
as
tell you, we
easy as
have-
rolling the dice right now.
We have 3 of the best math minds on there, yourself, Narissa, and Kyle. And if the 3 of you, along with the rest of the assessment, come back and say, then all of us are gonna say, okay, you're absolutely right that we should drop this, but if
Till
there's
next
any
time.
glimmer of
Yeah.
Till next time.
well, if there's any
Jeff's got a
glimmer of hope
strong memory.
Thing
to
is,
try,
the thing is, we're at the tipping point though, because Raleigh was up there and it was close to, it was almost that the two towns combined would be what the difference in Raleigh was, and if you wanna go that way, and if people, who are sitting here don't, there's gonna be a problem sometime down the road where a town like Raleigh or something is gonna go up over $1 million, then the other towns are gonna say, well, you have to cut.
Salisbury
Then Larry's gonna say, well, we're gonna have to cut $1 million or something.
And trust me, we were the ones, we went back through 10 years, Salisbury every single year, this was last year was the first year.
But I'm just saying
But I'm
because,
saying, so I, as the Salisbury rep, was going, yeah, there's no way Newbury is ever gonna go, yes, please sign us up to pay more. And we're usually the one that's paying more. Now, we were happy last year, I'm not complaining about it, last year was the one where you were wishing we had that vote and had it, know, so I totally agree, it's just, you know.
It's a tipping point that someday that's gonna happen, and then what's gonna be if we don't, agree as, people, in the finance committee and on selectmen, it's gonna happen someday, I mean, it's inevitable,
Which is what I was screaming and shouting for 7 years until I saw all the graphs that Erica and Kyle did, and then I was like, yep, nope, I lose, there's no way we're ever gonna be able to pass it, so.
And the biggest thing is we just have to keep pushing our state
State,
legislators.
right, our state reps.
That's the thing, that's where it ultimately comes down, because it shouldn't be the fighting of the three towns of who supports more or less, it's we need a bigger piece of our pie being supported by the state in one way or another. And the more voices that we all can rally in our own communities to talk to our reps and talk to the people in the State House, we're small communities, so we're not gonna pull the weight of a Boston or Worcester or Lawrence or Haverhill. We're not gonna pull the same number, but we do have more towns. So,
And we do have
Yeah.
Senator Tarr, who, just so everybody knows, was named the MASC senator. What is he
Good.
called?
yeah, so
Legislator of the year.
Legislator of the Year.
but if we can get the
So that
state
means
to
that
take more
every,
burden.
School committee in the district, so he's represented by, nominated by all of them.
Some of the issue is the hold harmless, because when the select board met with our representatives, we met with Shand and Senator Tarr, we really, trust me, we pushed them hard. And we're like, why was Newburyport getting all this? And they're like, because Newburyport got more kids. The reality is that, they may not have to shift it because we're just not getting more students. Our numbers are going down, so that throws off that equation. That our numbers, so the kind of hold harmless, we get screwed with that. We get the $65,000 more last year? Was that what it was? 68,000.
66 and change.
Yeah, so that's gonna continue to happen, so.
So I mean, I think the good news is we've actually been going up somewhat, but it's all been on Raleigh's back, right?
Right,
It's part of
right,
it.
right.
But also the Student Opportunity Act has been having the amount of, not having, quartering roughly, the amount of what they call hold harmless debt. So it used to be that we would have to have enough students to warrant $4.4 million worth more spending. It's now down to like $1.7 million over the last, I think, 3 years it's been cutting. So it gets cut every year. So we're getting closer to that break-even point every year. We're not gonna get there in 7 years, but if we had some growth plus it continuing to get cut, we're just getting closer all the time. And if we had something like we talked about Senator Lewis's bill to shift the state-local split, that pushes it even farther. Like everything is just helping us to get a little closer, and I just keep feeling like we could step over a threshold eventually if all the stars align, and once we're over that threshold, then but it's not gonna be just the Student Opportunity Act. It's not gonna be just growth. Like any one thing can't do it. It has to be those things coming together.
What is Raleigh's increase, what is it, do you have the numbers for enrollment, how it is this year?
No, and that was, so it's an October 1 count. So that's the snapshot of the data. And then we have to certify student enrollment, staff enrollment, and then we get choice data. All of that, we generally get the roster back with our choice in and out confirmed by December. And then actually, we paid MASC last year to try and, because it was Mars, thank you, sorry. Definitely didn't pay MASC, appreciate that. Paid Julie Kelly and Mars to do some work to help us try and calculate, because the governor had an extra 6 weeks or whatever it was to get her first budget out. So we were trying to project that foundation enrollment. And forever, I've been trying to figure out why I couldn't understand, I could never quite get to foundation enrollment. And there were these factors baked in that give proportional ratios just to enrollment numbers before, so it's, yes, I could give you kind of general ballpark in a short amount of time, but sometimes that doesn't matter, right? Cause if free reduced lunch numbers swing, or EL, English language learner numbers swing, and those supports, or special ed numbers swing, that has wild implications on the foundation enrollment.
One student moved.
Yeah, right, we had that one
Yeah.
That goes
student,
to Ohio.
yeah, Florida,
Oh, it's a
Florida,
Florida?
doesn't matter,
Oh.
not
No,
in our
It's
community.
very expensive.
Some of the
And it was a
things,
big bill.
some of the things that affects Newbury is,
579.
Yeah, 500,000,
that
almost.
a lot of the new houses in our town don't seem to have anyone in it young enough to have kids.
Yeah, I
Most
mean,
people that are coming to Newbury, especially Old Town and Plum Island.
It's not a B, it's a,
yeah,
Kind of like a retirement.
don't want it in my hair like it was just a minute ago.
Destination for retirement.
in Salisbury the same with the beach, right, lots of condos going up, but they're not
So
coming in
you
with.
you guys have water and that, Byfield has water, so sometimes you have more growth, but it seems,
And sewer now.
and at least that's what's happening in Plum Island.
Sewer.
But it's really becoming, people don't have kids anymore.
Well, 'cause people who are kid age can't afford the houses that are being built, so.
That's a.
It has been a steady swing, I think I said this last month, I was looking up enrollment data, and in 1998, Newbury Elementary had 817 students. It was the largest elementary by far,
Yeah, I can remember.
right, and it's now just swung in the other direction, so.
Really?
Yeah. The district had close to 3,700 students. We're at 2,200 and change now. We've bottomed out and are going in the other direction, slowly but surely.
Aaron to the rescue.
That was never kill a living.
Okay, the next item is the FY '24 assessment request.
Still alive?
There's another one.
Is there a nest there?
No, that one's dead, there's another one.
Here's one of
He's after you.
To review correspondence received from the town of Riley requesting a recalculation of the FY '20 current year operating assessment based upon state data projections and to discuss the implications of recalculating assessments.
So this letter was received, and this will go on, this hasn't gone to the school committee for a discussion yet, so it will be on, next week's agenda. Hold my line. We have it on the agenda?
I believe so.
Okay, we'll make note, we'll have to make sure it's on, it will be on next week's school committee agenda for them to discuss. But I just wanted to, take a moment to clarify, so, the request from the Rowley Board, Select Board was to, reduce assessments based on increased state revenues. And so the two state revenues that were, listed is the Chapter 70, which we budgeted at $9,040,000. The final cherry sheet was $9,107,000. And then the regional school transportation, that the final budget, we assumed a $1,005,000. And the cherry sheet says $1,135,000. So historically, we have to make a guess in March, right? And then the state budget is what the state budget is. Chapter 70 is a real figure. That is a figure that it can be cut, and that can certainly increase. But once the state budget is finalized, rarely does that ever change. And so that is a firm number. The difference is when we were finalizing our budget, the assumption was a minimum of $30 per student. We got double that, they doubled it to $60 per student, so that's the $66,700. Regional transportation, that figure is, I think the best way to describe it is fictitious. So they use last year's calculation, budget, the DESI gives a number to the legislature and says, we believe we will reimburse districts roughly 80%, 85%, 87%, 90%. DESI then uses that figure and calculates, based on last year's costs, what we would get if that percentage came true. There have been years when we got more. That money just filters through to our excess and deficiency that gets certified. You get a report of that in the towns, what our excess and deficiency, our version of your free cash. It filters through that way. Or there have been times when it's gone the other way and we've come up short in our assumption. We've generally tried to be conservative, but not overly conservative. We've tried to, kind of wiggle into a final number for budget. We've sometimes got ourselves into trouble overestimating regional transportation because it's easy to do, that number doesn't come through. So last year we were did it end up low by 5%, I think was the number?
Yeah, it was supposed to be 85%, it ended up being 79.5%.
At the end. So we literally don't know that number until the end of the year.
It's usually like June 28th, just
So
to
we
give you
get-
an idea of like how close to the end.
Yeah, we'll get half of that projected number in a December payment if the Department of Ed decides to pay on time, if someone's not mad. And then, once everyone completes their end of year reports, they go through and do some spot auditing, check those, and depending on what everyone's costs were, and we know everyone's costs are going up, they dole out that money on a percentage factor, and we see what our final number is. So the chapter 70 figure of 60, that 66,000, that would be a real figure that we could work with our towns and reallocate and reduce the assessments by that amount collectively. The 135,000 or 130,000 for regional transportation committee, I don't wanna speak for the committee, and the committee may disagree next week, but I would never recommend to the committee that they touch that number, because it's never even been close to accurate at this point compared to where it lands at the end of the year.
Not just that, but we know it's going to be low this year because the estimate that they build is actually based on 2 years ago. So since they add essentially 4% per year as part of their estimation process. So because they're doing it before the final numbers are available, right? So we already know that last year was 5.5% below, but they only added 4%. So we're in theory going, I mean, there's no telling because we don't have final numbers yet, like they don't have final numbers yet, but it's very likely that it's going to be low because that's already behind the curve now, right?
Districts are rebidding and getting 15% increases and 10% increases in a single year.
Yeah.
So, that would be my suggestion to the committee next week, but Neil?
Rather than considering reducing the assessment this year, would the committee potentially consider crediting whatever amount each of the communities gets toward next year's assessment, because you're gonna wind up with that money in E&D anyway?
So I mean, I can only say our financial policies right now say that we're not gonna dip into excess and deficiency unless we absolutely have to, because with the exception of the stadium. Because it was dinging our credit rating, and we need our credit rating to be high for the I'll say a potential project down the road. So we developed that financial policy, I think 2 years ago, and brought it here and then ended up voting it through and.
Okay, fair answer, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah, and just to, as a reminder, in our budget, we moved the money through ESSER into stabilization and started a funding schedule of 75,000 last year. So there was 1.5 million at the end of last year, 75,000 went into stabilization. The plan that Narissa referenced was adding 75,000 for the next 3 years to the budget, so there becomes a $300,000 line to begin funding routinely capital stabilization in OPEB. The goal, when we talk about buildings, if we're gonna invest in a new regional middle school, high school, or renovated middle school, high school, we wanna make sure that we have the stabilizations that we never had in the past to address issues as they come up, so they can be preventative and routine maintenance, rather getting to the point of catastrophic failure when there isn't anything you can do other than replace. So just to make sure that that's on the table, I will say that will be a priority that I will put in the budget proposal, is staying true to that 75,000, cause we haven't even put a dent in our OPEB, in capital stabilization, there's a need there, so.
75,000 for the 3 towns, or just one each town?
So capital stabilization would be for the middle, it would be district fund.
Yeah.
A district funded stabilization, if the 3 towns own the 3 elementaries, that's not a question. The 3 towns own the 3 elementaries, so what we're trying to codify in the regional agreement, which is what we've done in practice, is anything over 20,000 would be the responsibility of the town. So we would work with the town to determine if they wanted to make a change. And then capital stabilization would be to maintain the regional campus, but that doesn't mean if we decided there was a capital upgrade needed, make it up, we needed new projectors in the elementary schools, that we couldn't use those funds to make a, a capital investment in all 3 schools or all 5 schools. But that would be, so it'd be 75,000 increased for fiscal '24. If we did that again in fiscal '25, '6, and '7, that would be a $300,000 line. And so that in perpetuity or until it was changed would put $150 annually into stabilization and $150 into our OPEB, which I forget what the last number was.
$89 million, I think.
89?
I think either 89.
Up over 100, down to 60, and I believe it was around, it was in the 80s. Neil?
Sorry, one other thing, what's your bond rating now? I forgot.
Oh, way worse than yours.
Something negative.
Yeah, 8,
I think it's A negative.
You,
Double A
are you
negative.
investment grade?
we're investment grade, yes, we did not fall out of investment grade, but yes. And we had an unfavorable outlook, and we got them to shift to a favorable outlook. So the work that we've done over the last few years to put a set of stabilization, to have a funding schedule, to not touch E&D has shifted at least to have a positive outlook. And then I believe Moody's told us it takes a year or 2 or 3 of consistent effort after you've got the positive outlook to actually be able to request a bump. So our goal is that by the time we would be, right, so if we are accepted this December, we wouldn't be looking at a bond for 4 years, 3, 4, 5 years. It's because we have the feasibility money set aside. That would, by the time we would be bonding something, we would have the potential to have an improved, if not, I think all 3 towns, right? Aren't you all?
I was gonna say, what
Prime
a difference
now?
23 years
Right?
makes. We had to go through yours
Yeah.
23 years ago for
Yeah.
SES.
Yep.
Thank you to Neil.
Yeah.
We are now
Yeah.
looking quite different.
So we're on the mend, but yeah, so just to confirm, right, so any of the borrowing that happens for a regional middle school, high school would be in the district's name, and the district owns
And-
it, and assessed on an annual basis, it would be a capital assessment. So if enrollments are shifting, so too would the capital assessment each year, just like it does now for the stadium.
If you actually have that rating, could you just forward it to me?
I will, yeah,
So ideally, what would you want, how much should you have? I mean, what's the recommended for the size, this?
for stabilization?
Yeah.
Oh, right, so excess and deficiency is capped at 5, it's recommended at 3. We had,
Stabilization is capped at 5.
it's capped at 5, yep. So, 5% of call it a $50 million operating. Yeah, we're nowhere near it. And again, so if we have $1,575,000 right now, the assumption is the bulk of that, if not all of that, would be the feasibility study if we get welcomed into the MSBA. So we would go back likely to 0, and then if we can fund that for 3 years, start putting in, after 3 years, be putting in $150 in each every year. So over the course of 10 years, we'd put 1.5 into stabilization and 1.5 into OPEB.
In the bond meeting though, they did make it clear it's not necessarily the total number, it's the plan and adhering to the plan that is going to help us out. So that's where we're at right now, was trying to establish the plan a couple of years ago and then make sure we're adhering to that plan now.
Specifically, having a stabilization, a funding mechanism, stick to it, and then excess and deficiency, not routinely tapping into it. Those were the 2 big ones. So this year, again, part of that 1.5, 1 million was an ESSER offset, and 500 came out of stabilization. So we certified at 1.1, which put us over the 5. So that means we put 90 towards the stadium assessment. We put 5 into the capital stabilization fund, and then so we roughly have a balance of 500 and change to start the year, and then we'll see. They're obviously, Kyle and our treasurer Kevin are working on certifying our E&D.
It just shows you basically how tight, the Triton, I mean, compared to like Newton or one of those schools, what are they, $9 million or something?
Oh, yeah. I would welcome anyone to come in and look at every dime. There's nothing hidden.
To your point, that's why I fight for their budget. I know all 3 of our towns were struggling, I get it, but that's proof and pudding right there. Their budget is as small as they can make it. That's the proof.
The next item is the FY25 budget development. note that we can expect a more timely FY25 state budget development process this year, and that we anticipate providing Triton's preliminary budget driver estimates at the November DCC meeting.
Yeah, just to note that very preliminary document, which, as we'll share next week, maybe have changed a little bit since we shared it with the finance subcommittee a week ago. That will be shared with the school committee next week and then begin to set the picture. And I can tell you it's gonna be a tough year. We'll start off right there. It's gonna be a tough year, so.
The other piece of this too, though, is that because it's Governor Haley's second year, we're back to the fourth Wednesday in January of having our numbers. So that's important too. We're not gonna be in this situation where we basically almost have to have a final budget before we have state numbers. That was what happened last year, because it was her first year. Now she's got a tighter deadline.
Fully in control.
Let's hope.
Second rodeo. It's her second rodeo, so.
Oh, second rodeo,
She's
yes.
gonna know it all.
She's mastered how to ride a horse in the last year. We're good.
Is there anything else that anybody has a question or comment?
I just wanna say thank you to the school board committee and their school board administrative staff for doing as best they can.
Thank you. And the next item is the meeting adjournment. I just want to say thank you to all of you. I mean, it takes all of us to do this work, and I appreciate all the work that our towns do for our students at Triton. And as I always say, it takes a village to do the work that we all do. Thank you very much, and when's the next meeting?
November 16th.
Flying out.
Thank you, and have a nice night.
Charleston for a night.